The Sound Off Podcast. The show about podcast and broadcast. Starts now.
This could be the first time I've actually said you sound great and you're using a Blue Yeti.
You don't like the Blue Yeti, Matt? Come on.
I know 5 out of 5 podcast producers dislike the Blue Yeti has always been my joke, but you've got it set up right and things are going well. So good. Congratulations.
It's a good start. It's a very good start. I'm feeling optimistic now.
I'm looking at, where you started. I don't have all the details, but I do know you took broadcasting at Conestoga.
Cones to go. Yeah.
I've never heard
Sorry. No, it's a little. See, now I'm just being the hick that I am.
I was waiting for the correction, and you did it, and then I got the joke.
Yeah. So in the area where I live, not only is there a Conestoga College and a Conestoga River, but the Conestoga wagon is what all the Pennsylvania Dutch Mennonites brought to settle this region, and then we have a Conestoga village in the region. So my dad, when I was a kid, when we went out to the village of Conestoga, always called it Cones to Go. So hence my hickness shows through.
You're not being a hick. You're just being local.
That's what I am. Through and through, baby. Through and through.
That's going to come up a number of times today because you're so well ingrained in the region. But why broadcasting? Why did you want to get into it?
Because it's honestly the only thing I ever had any interest in. So I come from a family of teachers. My sister followed in the family footsteps. My father was an educator in this community for 30 plus years. And I just assumed I was a reasonably good student through elementary and high school. I had the marks to get into university and pursue a bachelor's degree and get into teaching. And even as I did that, thinking, that's kind of what you're supposed to do, right? That's what I saw my dad do every day. He'd come home with his briefcase. We'd sit down and have dinner. He'd take off his tie. Very traditional, leave it to beaver kind of stuff, right? And all this time I'm watching this, but I'm fascinated by this medium of radio. I listened to it constantly. I was the kid with the transistor radio in his bedroom at night, listening to the CHUM FM, not the FM at the time, but the CHUM Top 30, all of these things, and never really thought, I couldn't make the connection between what I listened to and what excited me so much and an actual job. So I started out in teaching, and after a year, I was like, not a chance. This is just not what I want to do. And I switched gears, and I went to broadcasting school, and the rest, as they say, is history. But it truly is the only thing that ever really lit the fire for me.
So that CHUM 30, how incredible was that? Because that thing used to boom. And listen, I know the nostalgia's there in the 60s. I know there's affinity for the 70s. But when those early 80s records came on 1050 CHUM, something like Soft Cell would just punch through the radio with these big voices. And yeah, it was, it was going to change in 1986, but those mid 80s, those early 80s songs coming through. Yeah, I'd want to get in a radio too.
Absolutely. And I must confess, Matt, I was a top 30 countdown CHUM guy, but I was 680 CFTR all day, every day, commercial-free Sundays, Tom Rivers, you name it. I don't need to go through it all with Mike Cooper, everything else. But yeah, it was honestly a really formative part of my youth.
You went to Waterloo as well, didn't you?
I did. That's where I got my bachelor's degree. That's what led me into teaching. And I got a degree in English Lit. That's really working out well for me today. And yeah, after I finished there and I did my year of teaching, it was off to Conestoga College and studied broadcasting there.
Ask me how my poli-sci degree is doing for me.
Yeah, but I'll bet you that you make really good water cooler conversation. Does anybody still say that? But come on, in this day of Trump and Trudeau and everything else going on in the world, poli-sci comes in handy, pal.
It's certainly cocktail talk. That's the thing about, I was always told by my professor at Acadia University, he said, it was Agar Adamson, and he said, you'll always have something great to talk about at a cocktail party, including Malta. Okay.
Yep, exactly.
So once you graduated, where'd you go next?
So when I graduated from Conestoga, about 4 months later, I hopped on a big old jet airplane and made my first ever visit to British Columbia. I got hired at a radio station, and I must confess, I had a little bit of an in at this radio station, and I am forever grateful to the guy who gave me the chance. His name's Paul Scott. He had worked at CFCA, which is now, oh my gosh, what do we have here? It's the Virgin Signal, 105.3 in Waterloo. But CFCA was a big, booming, CHUM-owned box back in the day in Waterloo, and Paul had been the program director there. Ended up at Conestoga College as the program director. He was the first instructor I met when I started at Conestoga, my very first day, and he was everything I needed to feel better about the decision I had just made, because I was taking a pretty sharp U-turn, to say the least, in my career. So Paul and I hit it off from day one, and it was a 3-year program at Conestoga. And at the end of my second year, Paul left the college to get back into radio, and he became the manager in Salmon Arm, British Columbia, a small network of stations. We had 3 stations, a repeater, and an FM transmitter that picked us up as well. But Salmon Arm, of all little places in British Columbia, was the headquarters of this network. And so a year later, when I graduated, and Paul and I, of course, had stayed in touch, he had an opening for a swing jock, and I was glad to take it. So August of 1996, I hopped on that plane in Toronto and flew out west to get things started.
I kind of feel like you're one of the last ones to be able to get up and go and do a swing shift. And I think it was probably sort of towards the end of, we're also going to get rid of overnight shortly. Digitization began to come in. So yeah, you got that small market experience.
I think you nailed it. I feel like that. And I tell the stories to the kids, literally, that are half my age that I work with today, that when I started out, but you're absolutely right. The year prior to my leaving for British Columbia and full-time work, I was the overnight guy at CKPC in Brantford. I started that in June of 95, just doing weekends and then filling in whenever they asked me to fill in, because that's what you do when you're starting out. But I joke now that the station that I started at in Brantford, I'm so old, or it's so old, they've shut it down now. It went dark about a year ago, but it was the overnight shift, midnight to 6, Saturday to Sunday on CKPC. Brantford, the old owner, Dick Buchanan, made us say it. It wasn't Brantford, Brantford, Ontario. Anyway, and then from there out to do swing. So I was doing, what did I have? Monday, Tuesday, 6 to midnight. Saturday, Sunday, 6 to noon. And then Friday was kind of a general all-around day in Salmon Arm. And looking back, what a great opportunity. I literally did everything, Matt, from answering the phones to writing commercials to doing production to hosting my show to doing news. Like, you name the department, with the exception of music. I never really got into music. I tried a little bit. They had this old version of Music Selector that just confused the hell out of me. So that was probably the one department I didn't touch when I was out in BC. Why
do you have to use F2 to save everything?
Exactly. What does that even mean?
It's like the first lesson. Now hit F2. Why F2? Why are we hitting F2? Why F2? What is local in Salmon Arm?
What is local in Salmon Arm?
What are the events that you would have to go out to? What would constitute local?
The fountain in the main park, the name of which escapes me, which is terrible. Armstrong? No, it wasn't. Anyway, every spring, it's kind of like Groundhog Day, except it is literally spring. And when the fountain comes on, it's a sure sign that the nice weather is there. And the other big thing, and I'm so saddened by this, because looking back, I had no idea what I had when I had it, insofar as this area of British Columbia, kind of nestled in between Kamloops and Kelowna, is one of the most beautiful, breathtaking areas in the country. But I'm a young kid. I'm starting out. I want to get to Toronto and start doing morning radio or on to Hockey Night in Canada or something. And so for me, it was just the idea that I'm in this little itty-bitty place, and the sooner I can build some skill and build some resume and get out of here, the better. But I would say the main calling card of Salmon Arm was that it was the houseboat capital of Canada. You should have seen, it's called the Shuswap Lakes in the summertime. You could barely see the water for all the houseboats out there. Just incredible. And that's one of the things it's very well known for.
How did you work your way back east?
Persistence. I haven't kept a lot. Sometimes I kick myself for that. For example, jumping ahead in the timeline, but there was a moment where I was at 640 and Q in Toronto when Howard Stern was the syndicated morning show, and I got to do the news one morning, filling in for somebody who was sick. And even to this day, I'm like, that was pretty damn cool. I got to do the morning news updates on Q107 in Toronto when Stern was the morning guy. Do you think I saved the recording? No. But for some reason, over all of these years, I have carried with me, and I still have it in a file cabinet not far from where I'm sitting right now, a file folder full of my rejection letters. And this is like legit letters and envelopes. It's kind of cool to look at the stations and the logos and the call letters that rejected me over the years. But we would get, what was it? The Record magazine, I think it was called.
Yep.
And anyway, there were a couple that would come into the station, and I'd always, when I was there, one of the beauties of my shifts was I was there by myself. So when I was, having a little song sweep, I could look at the ads and see which ones appealed to me, and I applied everywhere with hopes that I would eventually get landed a place back east. And sure enough, that's eventually what happened when they hired me in Thunder Bay.
Also remember there was a publication that had a list of every person in every position at every radio station. And I can't remember the magazine, but it was like number 8 would be program director, and it would be listed. And then the address would be there. And then you send your demo. You could sort of send off you could cold call essentially your demo to the person just with the address. It was, and then eventually I think I know one PD who hid it. So we would stop sending our tapes out.
But doesn't it feel like we're talking about a completely different universe right now? Because these physical magazines and directories existed. And yes, it would be a demo tape, as in a cassette. You would physically write a letter and put it in the mail. I mean, it's crazy. I have physical copies, not emails, but copies of letters that PDs sent back to me, form or otherwise, in this file folder. It's bizarre to think how quickly that has changed. I mean, we're talking 30 years here.
Yeah, and it's been forgotten because the idea of getting up to move to a smaller market is completely vanished. Mobility has not, disappeared. There's still mobility in the profession. Even if you get to the top of your game, like Colin Cowherd's going to relocate from LA to Chicago, that happens. But the idea of when you're starting out, like, moving across the country for a particular gig seems very foreign to the recent grads.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I remember vividly during my time at Conestoga College, one of my instructors saying to us that if you are serious about getting into the radio business, there are 2 things you should keep in mind. One is, don't expect to make a lot of money. And number 2 is, pack a suitcase. And I never forgot that. And he was, he was bang on.
So how did you get back to Toronto to work? I think it'd be about 1997 or 1998 when Howard Stern was on the air then. The station was, I think it was owned by Wick.
Yeah. Yeah, the old Western something communications, right? But
yeah.
So first stop before that was in Thunder Bay. That was my first stop after Salmon Arm. And again, looking back, what a great training ground that was. Vic Krasowski was my news director up there. And he was hard on me, but he was great for me. He really helped me kind of find my way as a young news person. But it was also Thunder Bay. I was a younger person, and I've never been strong on geography. I say that to this day. It's the God's honest truth. I mentioned earlier boastfully that I was pretty good in school. I suck with geography. So yeah, Thunder Bay's Ontario. But if anybody's ever been, they realize it's like not really Ontario, right? Like Thunder Bay is its own place, so far away. I would come home to Southern Ontario, to Waterloo region to visit family. It was a 22-hour Greyhound bus ride. Yes, you're making stops, but 22 hours on the bus. And yes, I brought the Greyhound bus, which doesn't run anymore, because I didn't have a car, because I got in radio and they told me I wouldn't make much money, which I wasn't. So I hung out up there as long as I could, which was about a year. My first day was in March of 98, and it was minus 23 as I walked to work. And think about it, coming from the interior of British Columbia to essentially spring in Thunder Bay, which felt like the worst winter I'd felt in several years. And I'm like, what the hell did I do? Why am I up here? But it was a great place to be. And then from there, it was back into Southern Ontario, and the opportunity presented itself. And you want to talk cold calls. So I still kick myself for this. I'm glad it worked out. But I left cold turkey in Thunder Bay. I'm like, I can't do it anymore. I'm home/Ontario, but not close enough to home. So I just packed it in, and I moved back in with mom and dad. And my parents are great, but that was the last time I ever wanted to be home. And while there, I picked up part-time work at 570 in Kitchener, where I am today, which is a story unto itself. They're gone, back for good kind of thing. But at the time, I wanted to stay in radio. And so I got some part-time work there while I got part-time work somewhere else just to make ends meet. And I started cold calling. And I called Dave Trafford. I hope Dave listens, because I know Dave is still kicking around doing cool stuff. In fact, my wife just took a seminar from him, helping out with her nonprofit in the last year or so. Anyway, and Traff hired me to do, of all things, overnight news at AM 640, which had just exited. We were just out of the MOJO days, if I'm not mistaken, because then we became Talk 640, and people would joke it's toxic 40. Anyway, Talk 640 was the station. And funny story about that, Matt. So I'm hired from cold calling, leave my part-time job in Kitchener, move to Toronto, and get a crappy. I was thinking, should I edit myself here? Yes, I will. I get a lousy little basement apartment in Scarborough, which was so far into Scarborough, I was basically a neighbor of the zoo. But there I go. And at the time, 640 and Q were at Yonge and Norton. So I'd hop on the 401, get off at Yonge, go to Yonge and Norton. It was about a 15-minute commute, which is the best. Anyway, so I'm supposed to do overnight news. And I never, not one time, did an overnight newscast. I get in there, I start doing training during the day, obviously. And wouldn't you know, in that first 2 weeks with the training that I was doing, there was some sort of Highway 401 catastrophe where whatever happened with the collision, it sent a cube van off the expressway, off the highway, down into, I believe it was the Don Valley Golf Course. I'm not a golfer, but into the golf course down below. And we're trying to cover this as a radio station. And it's like, well, Farwell, you're around. Go out there and report. Like, get us some stuff and report back in for the afternoon talk show. So I did. And I mean, again, I'm fish out of water. I've had a little bit of news experience. Remember, I started in BC as a swing jock. I'm playing Elton John and Celine Dion. I get my teeth cut in news in Thunder Bay, thanks to Vic Krasowski and some great experiences. But at this point, I've got about a year plus some college worth of news experience. Now I'm in the biggest market in the country, and I've never done anything like this before, but off you go and you just do it. And I go plodding through. It was wintertime. I'm plodding through this golf course trying to get to the place where the truck had plunged from the 401 up above. I find it. I do some reports, blah, blah, blah. End of that day, which turned out to be a pretty long one, Traff pulls me into his office and he says, listen, I knew you had some reporting experience, but I didn't know you were that good at it, which I remember him saying that because I was so blown away by the compliment. And the next thing you know, I'm doing like a 9-to-5 reporting gig for 640. Never once did the overnight news, but just the way it happened is, that's how it turned out.
Yeah, a lot of people don't want to hear this, especially people from today's generation, that some people are just born with this. And some people have grown up around it, like you grew up around radio in some capacity. It's not something that can be taught completely. You can teach and enhance the current skills you have, but to be able to tell a story and be on location and not just file it is a special skill. I see more and more people who are in journalism today who are arriving. There's just more of the people who are just filing it. I did check the boxes, tell whatever story, but that ability to make it better. And I would say that because you didn't have any training, you had to learn on the job. You had to figure it out. And I know what you're thinking. And if you were thinking the way I was thinking of, how do I get through this so I don't screw it up and embarrass myself at the highest level? Right? I mean, that's that. And I think that's why today we don't have as many astute, journalistic people out there telling the stories, because they haven't been able to succeed or fail at a high level.
I think you absolutely nailed it. And that part about don't screw this up, Matt, I've got Evelyn Macco. I've got Marsha Lederman. I've got Kathleen Rankin and Larry Silver. And Tom Rivers was doing the morning show at the time at 6:40. So he would have been gone. This was in the afternoon. But the point is, these are the luminaries of radio news in Toronto that are on the receiving end of my pipsqueak reports. I was terrified of screwing it up, and they could not have been kinder, better as mentors and coaches. They were very complimentary for the day that was. They liked what I had done, but I also, to your point, I hadn't had enough experience yet to just think about checking boxes. I was kind of figuring it out as I went along, and that was probably the best thing. It all was just a pleasant, happy circumstance.
I know it's not the best advice, and I know a lot of people wouldn't recommend it, but some people, I would throw them to the wolves. You're going to go out there, you're going to be on the street corner, you're going to execute this particular contest, you're going to go and report from here. And I look at them before they left, and I said, hey, don't screw it up. Hey, and they're like, what's that supposed to mean? I go, just that. And just keep it in the back of your mind, don't screw it up can really mean, how's this going to land here? How's this going to land here? How's this going to land here? And I think, especially with politicians these days, they talk, they don't even know how anything's going to land.
It's funny. I say the exact same thing to every young broadcaster I work with today. When there are new people coming to the station, new people I'm working with, whatever it is. I've joked for years. The number one rule in radio and in life is don't screw up.
Yeah.
And I'll let them figure out what that means to them, but we have fun with it.
Yeah. As you plotted on through the 2000s, where'd you go?
Back to Kitchener. So I found myself back at, I've often referred to this story when I've had the chance to talk to folks about my career. The end of the line for me at 6:40, and I think that, did they go MOJO after? I wish I remembered the timeline better. You probably do. Regardless, the writing was on the wall that the station was in a state of flux.
Yeah.
Because, and look, I was still really young. Like, this is 4 or 5 years into my career, and so I was pretty naive. But it didn't take me too long to figure out that people were just disappearing around me and they weren't being replaced. And the next thing you know, I'm pretty much the only guy. The funny thing is, I told that story earlier about getting that apartment in Scarborough because it was relatively close to the station at Yonge and Norton. Well, when I had my reporting debut and they liked it so much, eventually I ended up being the City Hall or general assignment reporter, but I would cover City Hall as well. Mel Lastman was the mayor in Toronto at the time. And let me tell you, for anybody that wants to do news, get a character like Mel Lastman to be your city's mayor. Fantastic stuff. But all of a sudden, I was being sent downtown to City Hall in Toronto to do my job every day. So I'm now leaving my apartment in Scarborough and driving down the DVP like every other sucker in a commute. And if I tell you now that it took me 90 minutes, you'd think that's nothing compared to today. But again, this is 25 years ago. Anyway, so to the point of this, I realized as time went on that people were disappearing, not being replaced. It was just me. And I started a day covering, it was an awful, awful murder trial, which was at the court building on University, just near City Hall. So I check in at City Hall. We've got a little office there where I can file from. I pop up to the courthouse. I'd been going there every day to follow this case. Again, back when radio would send reporters to trials, and you'd sit there and Anyway, they got the verdict that day, and there was this big mad rush. It's just before 3:00, and literally, reporters were running out of the courtroom and the courthouse to get outside because you can't take your cell phone in with you or anything like that. So we want to file, and it was basically a race to be the first station to get the story on. So I remember getting that on for the 3:00 news that afternoon, and then I get paged, because that's how we kept in touch, by my news director. He's like, hey, listen, there was the threat of a transit strike happening at the time in Toronto. So now we've got this story finished, the trial, the Alison Parada. Like I said, it was awful. It's always stuck with me. 11-year-old girl, lured, kidnapped, murdered, body cut up and taken down in pieces to Lake Ontario. It was just terrible. So they get that verdict done. I file these stories. They say, get up to Queen's Park. There's going to be a media conference about the potential TTC strike. So I dutifully go about doing that, and I bugger off. And Queen's Park's not that far from City Hall, so I hoof it up there. Howard Hampton's the leader of the NDP at the time. He's holding this little media scrum outside his office, and we're going to make sure that the transit system doesn't shut down, but this strike threat is still looming over everybody's head. So I find out while I'm there that the two sides are meeting at a hotel downtown, and a lot of people were going there to kind of camp out on the talks because a negotiated settlement, an agreement is imminent. So off I go, and there I am now hanging out with a bunch of other schmuck reporters waiting for this imminent announcement of a deal that would keep the trains running. And it didn't come. And it didn't come. And it didn't come. And much like my experience in the physical newsroom at 640, where people were leaving and not being replaced, I'm sitting there outside these talks. So I came in that morning, started at 9, went to the court, covered it, got the verdict on the air, filed some stories, went to Queen's Park. Now I'm down at this hotel waiting for the imminent announcement of a TTC settlement. The other stations are freshening up. It's like a hockey shift, right? Your shift is over, somebody else is in. I'm the only guy. I'm all we had. The talks go through the night, Matt. I'm there all night. And the next thing you know, I'm reporting on Rivers' show the next morning. And I haven't gone home yet. So finally, the deal came down about 5:20, something like that, the next morning. So now I'm doing live hits on the morning show. I hoof it back to City Hall. I file some quick stories. And it's about 10 o'clock then, the next morning. It's 25 hours after I started my shift, so to speak. And my news director said, you can go home now. Like, thanks. That'd be all right. I couldn't remember where I parked my car. I was just a little bit dazed at that point. And that said to me, you know what? Like, good job. You gave it the old college try. And I put in my notice after that. I'm like, I can't keep doing this. And Pat Cardinal was the PD at the time. He did his best he was good to me. He didn't, take it poorly or anything, but I'm like, Pat, I can't. He tried to, offer some incentive, but it just, I had written it off in my mind. So I've often told the story, my famous 24-hour day. And so I popped back to Kitchener and got hired on a part-time basis. And then I filled my time making some real money in corporate communications, but I just couldn't. I could not. And anybody that's ever done radio knows this, right? It's a bit of an addiction. It's like an abusive relationship. But once you're in, you can't. You need to. I don't know what it is, but you need it. I needed it. So I dabbled part-time at 570 News. I can't remember which incarnation it was then. I think it still was the Tri-Cities Information Superstation, but 570 AM anyway, in Kitchener. I popped back there, got some part-time work, and then really filled my time in my bank account with a corporate job that paid incredibly well, and piddled around at that for a few years.
I'll tell you what I love, and this is I'll tell you what I love. It's how you explain the job. So this is something that you used to describe your time when you were co-hosting at Country 106.7. I get up at the crack of stupid so that when you get up just a little bit later, you're informed and entertained as you get your day started. My life is my show prep, so beware of the guy on the bar stool beside you. Community first, kids. play nice. That's brilliant, because that's the job description that for any successful local morning show, that's what you got to do. And if you explain that to the kids today, they're looking for the overtime. They're looking for, punch in, punch out stuff. And I'm like, that description that you put up there is really what's needed to go and to do a show and to really sort of have all the touch and feel and be part of the community. Yes, it's exhausting, but it's also quite rewarding.
I couldn't agree more. And I owe a debt of gratitude to a fellow by the name of David Jones, who was my next stop after I piddled around at 570 AM for a little while again. So as I said, I was making some decent money on the side for the first time in my life. And it made it hard to think about doing radio with any seriousness anymore. 570 tried to hire me, and I couldn't do it for the money. And then they tried a second time, and the money wasn't that much better. But in my heart, I'm like, you know what? Writing news releases and helping executives prepare speeches and presentations, it's just not really filling my bucket. So I took the full-time job again at 570 AM for half price, like I took a 50% pay cut, but it's because I decided this is what I want to do. It's what I've always wanted to do. You're going to give this a serious shot in your hometown. And wouldn't you know, with them showing the faith in me, like they keep me around part-time, they try to hire me full-time, I say no. They hire me again full-time, I say yes. And a year later, it's an ad in the newspaper, Matt. Of all things, in my local newspaper, there's a new radio station launching in Kitchener, 91.5 The Beat. And they had a bunch of positions open, including news director, of all things. And so I threw my hat into the ring. Next thing you know, 1 year after coming back into radio at 570 AM, I hop on board with this brand new kick-ass startup in Kitchener, which was owned by CanWest Global at the time. David Jones was our program director, and Mocha, who I don't think I need to give any other information about, the guy who's killing it in Toronto to this day and remains one of my dearest friends, one of the best humans I have ever met in my life, becomes a co-host. And anyway, what started this was everything is show prep. That is what Jonesy, as we affectionately called him, David Jones, our PD, drilled into our heads. And that's the way it went. It's real. It's authentic. Hey, I was at this place or that place and this thing happened or this person said that. Everything is show prep. And David drilled that into our heads, and it hasn't left me since. And I started there in 2004, so 20 plus years ago now.
Yeah, so you've been a jack of all trades, like going all the way back to Salmon Arm. Oh, look, you can spin records. Oh, look, you can do news. You can report. You're doing a talk show right now. I mean, you're like a Swiss Army knife of radio.
It takes me back to really that first job in Salmon Arm when I described it as literally answering phones, writing commercial copy, working in production and recording and creating commercials, etc. So yeah, and I get antsy. Like I like to do things. I like to challenge myself, and I've been so lucky. And these people that I've worked with have brought different things out of me. So I'll tell you. So when I was at the Beat, I also, as kind of, I don't know if you call it a side hustle, but look, I was always interested in what was going on. I had been doing news prior to joining the Beat. And so I got this evening talk show on our local Rogers TV cable outlet. And just let that sink in for a moment. I mentioned that the Beat was owned by CanWest Global at the time. It's a chorus station now. But imagine working full-time for Global and then kind of having a moonlighting on Rogers TV. Now, it wasn't a lucrative Rogers TV thing. It was just local to Kitchener-Waterloo. But I don't know that would happen anymore.
I'm surprised anybody would think that that's competition, because it's local public access and there's no ad dollars attached to it. So if I were your program director at Chorus, I would let you do it, which may explain why I stopped being a program director at Chorus.
You know what? David Jones let me do it too, and maybe that's why he's not a program director anymore either. I don't know, but it was an evening show, 3 nights a week. That was local issues based, and so I felt like I had fallen into just this perfect mix, right? So I'm having fun, cracking jokes on a top 40 station by day, and we're having a blast. And then at night, I make a teeny bit of extra money, but I'm deeply invested into what's going on in the community. And I would joke all the time. I'm like the mini wheats of Kitchener-Waterloo, right? I'm sweet side funny by day, and I'm the unsweetened, crusty, issues based side at night. It was a beautiful marriage. It really was, and it kept my toe kind of in that, and it kept me involved in things. And then as time went on, Matt, when I made the decision, ultimately, it'll be 8 years this June, to do a talk show. That's when I left the country show that you referenced a little while ago, all under the Rogers Kitchener umbrella. But the opportunity presented itself, and I thought, I'm ready for this challenge. I want this challenge. It's fun to spin records and do that kind of radio, but I'm ready to try this kind of radio. And to its credit, Rogers gave me the chance to do that.
I watched the Tom Green documentary the other night, and I'd forgotten that he got his start with Rogers Public Access Cable.
He sure did.
Yeah. Something that I wanted to sort of expand on for listeners who are listening globally, and that's the Kitchener-Waterloo area and how it has grown throughout your time from growing up. At one point, it jumped into being one of Canada's top 10 markets and may even be number 9 now. The area, there's a lot of tech. You add Kitchener and you add Waterloo together in the listening area, it's just grown exponentially in the last number of years. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. And it, I think, is one of the advantages that I still have to this day because I was there when, right? And when you're doing talk radio, especially, we know the demographic. We're all a little bit longer in the tooth, and we like to reminisce about those things. But it honestly, it kind of cheeses me off a little bit that according to every survey, we're still a small to medium market. I'm like, hang on a second. As a region, as you just mentioned, we are top 10 in Canada. You can take your Toronto, you can take your Vancouver, your Montreal, your Edmonton, and you get to number 10 on that list, and you're going to find the region of Waterloo, which encompasses Kitchener and Waterloo. Cambridge is the third city, and then 4 townships around it: North Dumfries Township, Wilmot, Wellesley, and Woolwich. So 4 townships, 3 cities, population about 700,000 people now. And yet, according to Numeris and all these surveys, we're still a small to medium market. That notwithstanding, it's grown incredibly. And another stroke of good fortune for me is that one of the other side hustles I had, because did I mention radio doesn't pay a lot of money? So when I was putting things together early, a job I had picked up in college, I went back to at different times because the guys were great. I would be the beer delivery guy at night. So I knew every single street. Like, I could rattle them off. I didn't need a map anymore. This is before GPS, kids. You used physical map books to find your way around. But it gave me such an appreciation for it. And at the same time, I look around now. Oh, I'll never forget. It's maybe 2-3 years ago. It's a Saturday afternoon. Granted, on one of our main streets in the city of Kitchener, Victoria Street, for anybody that ever comes into town. Main Street, lots going on. But it's a Saturday afternoon, and I think I waited 3 cycles to get through a light. And I looked to my wife sitting next to me. I'm like, where the hell are we? Like, it's Saturday afternoon. Kitchener doesn't do this on Saturday afternoon. We've got farmers markets. We've still got in this region businesses that you can go to that have hitch posts for horse and buggy. Why is this happening in Kitchener? But that just shows you how much it has grown. And you go downtown now, into the downtown that I would go into as a kid, because that's where the movie theaters were. That's where the video arcades were. That's the place we hung out. And I almost, to be honest with you, feel a little bit claustrophobic because there are so many tall condos down there now. But such is life, such is growth. And yes, we have grown exponentially in my lifetime here.
By the way, there's a lot more ad dollars that flow through that market than some of the bigger cities in Canada. That may also be part of its, proximity to Toronto and, more economics out east. As you know, in Canada, the country is run out of the east, no matter what people out west say. And anyways, yeah, it's probably even higher than a number 9 market if you were to add up the ad dollars.
You know what? And if you want to just take that a half step further, because we talk about it a lot when the numbers come in from, Rogers has 4 dozen radio stations, and our market, for whatever reason, tends to punch above its weight. There's something rather unique about it. We're not too close to London. We're not too close to Toronto, but we're close enough, I think. But there's a lot that goes on within the region itself. And yes, it does very well from a revenue standpoint. And
even to this day, you're still doing talk show. You're still doing hockey. When do you stop? I mean, your work day is endless.
It is. And again, if I'm just being honest, the older I get, the more difficult it becomes. But I do love it. I love it so much. The talk show, I will say, there have been multiple occasions over the last 7.5 years where I've thought back and wondered, why did I give up cracking jokes and going to country concerts for this? Because man, oh man, anybody that's done news talk knows what a grind it is. I went through COVID on the air. We're into the second presidency of Donald Trump. I mean, hell, I've made the joke that it's 4 more years of job security because there will be no shortage of things to talk about. But it's heavy. It's a lot. And so you try to do things to keep it a little bit lighter. And I think for me, having the opportunity to do the hockey helps immeasurably in that regard because it gives me a break from the heavy and it lets me have some fun. And yes, the hours are long. We go to precisely 0 glamorous places. I'm not long removed from a trip up through Sault Ste. Marie and Saginaw and Flint, Michigan. But when the game starts, you're in a hockey arena. And it's pretty damn high-level hockey. There are kids that come from this league right into the National Hockey League. Definitely kids that come from this league that have got pro aspirations and end up there one way or another. It's a high-level game. I love the game. And who wouldn't want to broadcast it? And really, it's the same thing when I get to work every day and prepare to go on the air for my 4-hour talk show. As heavy as it is and as tiring as it can be, I get to push a little red button that says on every morning at 9 o'clock. And to this day, the little kid in me still gets pretty damn excited about that.
Who is the most famous Kitchener Ranger?
Like ever?
Name me 2 or 3 that I might know.
Gabriel Landeskog.
Okay.
John Gibson just won his 500th career game for the Anaheim Ducks. He was a goaltender here. I'm going to get in a lot of trouble if I miss one of the big ones. Brian Bellows is probably the most famous. Now, he goes back, kids, you ask your parents if you need to, okay? But Bellows was our captain when we won our first. Look, you hear what I just did? I did the we with the hockey team. I'm not even employed by the team. I'm employed by the station, but I grew up here watching these guys. They're we. Scott Stevens, Larry Robinson, Al McInnes. Yeah, there's a pretty lengthy list. Bill Barber was here. Don Edwards, Don Beaupre, Nazem Kadri, who's in the league still today with Calgary. Many. But yeah, most famous, Landeskog right now. Johnny Gibson. Yeah, there's so many guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I ran into Brian Bellows once.
No,
eating chicken wings across from the Forum in Montreal, and it was just weeks before they won the Stanley Cup in '93.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
He was just back for a 40th anniversary of their Memorial Cup. And that was a pretty big deal because he hasn't come back a whole lot. There are all kinds of things like Brian Bellows, like when he was done with hockey, he went back to Minnesota where he loved being and he just lived in the woods somewhere. He became a hermit. But clearly he's still around. It was great to see him when he came back a couple of years ago. But yeah, definitely one of our bright lights. And unfortunately, he won that Stanley Cup with the wrong team, Matt. You know.
Oh, we're not still here, are we? With the high stick and the
yes,
and
yes,
we are still here with the high stick and Carrie Fraser. Okay,
damn that Carrie Fraser. Like my whole life, Matt. I'm born in '71. I haven't even seen a finals appearance. Come on. Kerry Fraser denied me that.
Yeah. You haven't seen the Leafs lift the Stanley Cup in color.
I haven't seen the Leafs lift the Stanley Cup.
You just recently saw them win their first playoff series in high definition.
Yes, I did. Yes, and just so you know, I took the little mini cup that I keep by my TV when the Leafs play, and I held it up in the air like this. I'm like, look at us, look at us.
Tell me about the podcast, and you know, full disclosure, you and I did work together to build your podcast. You're on the Believe Network now, but the OHL podcast, man, you have carved out a wonderful piece of podcasting here.
Well, I owe you a tremendous debt of gratitude for that, because I'm still, I think, figuring it out as I go along, but I was completely blind in all of this until you gave me some really good pointers early on, for which I remain grateful. But yeah, I think carving out's a good way to look at it. I love doing it. Again, it just gives me that break from the daily stuff that I do. And I really do love the game of hockey and this level of hockey. And what occurred to me, and I think this is why it's been able to grow into what it's grown into, is because nobody was doing anything like this. And look, there are 20 markets in the league right now. They're talking about aggressively expanding. So I think in the next several years, we'll be up to 24 or more. But the reality is, there was nothing like this serving the game. And in fact, the coverage of the game outside of radio, which almost every market still has, the coverage comes from cable access TV and volunteers. So it's not, I don't think the coverage is where it needs to be for the league. But I looked around and thought, well, 20 markets, and most markets are drawing, 2,500 plus fans. There are some that are lower, but in and around there, I'm thinking, well, if this many people are invested enough to go to the rink, surely I can capture a percentage of them to listen to me talk about the league once a week. So the idea was born. And in fact, early on, the plan was to almost exclusively just interview former players and people that had been around the game and get some stories, etc. But it kind of evolved into this weekly, if I may just drop the 32 Thoughts idea, something along those lines, where you've got your coverage of what's going on in the league, a little bit of commentary and analysis around it, and then the occasional interview thrown in. So I think it was an untapped market, to be honest with you.
It's called the OHL podcast. We know exactly what's in it, right?
I'm pretty clever that way, Matt. Not just a hat rack, buddy. Not just a hat rack.
504 episodes, and I think it's just another one of the more successful podcasts that's out there that's really sort of found its audience. And by audience, I love looking at the stats and seeing all the Scandinavian traffic of people just trying to keep up with their sons from back home and whatnot. So it's it's exciting.
You know what's funny about that, the Scandinavian audience, and there's always been, and again, not knowing a whole lot, still don't know a whole lot coming into this and where I'm at today, but there was always this tick from the Philippines. I'm like, what the hell? Like, this has got to be a mistake, or some guy living there used to live in Kitchener, and we have since connected. He sends the occasional email. He'll comment on some of our stuff on YouTube, etc. He lives in the Philippines now. He likes to joke about the great weather, but local guy from our region, now living in the Philippines, but still follows his hometown hockey team.
Mike, thanks so much for taking the time today to join us on the podcast and tell us your story.
Matt, I am so grateful for the opportunity to do it, especially with you. So thank you very much for having me.
The Sound Off Podcast is written and hosted by Matt Kundle. Produced by Evan Serminski. Edited by Chloe Emo Lane. Social media by Aiden Glassy. Another great creation from the Sound Off Media Company. There's always more at soundoffpodcast.com.